Hi, and welcome back to Backstory Scripts. It's been, hopefully it's been quite a short gap between episodes this time, as we are back with Mountains of Madness, as we mentioned in the Wonder Woman episode, written by Guillermo Del Toro and Matthew Robbins. In case you haven't listened to the show before, Backstory Scripts, it's a show where we take long-forgotten Hollywood scripts that either just weren't made, had production issues, like this film, or has been, dramatically changed since it eventually came out, like we covered Stephen King's It. And, yeah, First we start off with a bit of the context, then we go into a full breakdown of the story, and then a very short wrap-up at the end. But the main bulk of the episode is just going through the plot of the film, which I think will be a point for this one, because this has still got the possibility of being made, asterisks, right?
I can't ever see it being made. I know what you mean. I know that it's not been, completely shut down, and I know that Guillermo Del Toro is a career high at the moment. But I can't see this film ever being made. At least not like this. If it is made, I don't think it will be made like this. So I'm going to actually say no, and I could talk about why later if we have time.
Sure, yeah. Well, just to go into the brief context behind this film. So this was Guillermo del Toro's dream project. It's based on the 1930s book by H.P. Lovecraft, with the same title.
It's not a book. It's very short. You can actually find it on Wikipedia. It's like a pamphlet.
Well, you can get it in book form, but it was serialized, wasn't it, in magazines at the time? Kind of like Charles Dickens was originally.
But those Charles Dickens ones pieced together to form books.
Oh, yeah, they are forever.
They piece together to form books, whereas this is very short. Comparatively.
Yes, yeah. If you look up the audiobook on YouTube, because it's free, you can listen to this if you want, or read it. It takes 4 hours for the audiobook, so it's very quick to go through. I briefly read through, skimmed it after reading the script. The equivalent of the story is just the characters seeing stuff that gets much more delved into in this script.
It's almost like a fan fiction of that, in the sense that it delves into stuff that the book hints at, or that it provides more backstory and more detail about those things.
But never over-explaining, I found.
Yeah. From what I gathered, I know a bit of H.P. Lovecraft. I actually don't know this, but I know a couple of other stories, and I have read bits and pieces, and I'm always surprised by how ahead of his time he really is. Compared to a lot of other writers from his day, his stuff feels modern. It's amazing how cinematic some of it feels, how edgy some of it is, again, for the period, and how weird and out there it is. In particular, in the instance with this one, it felt like, I as I was reading it, I was thinking of all these other films that it very obviously reminds you of, but I was thinking, hang on, those films are probably... Well, for example, I think one of the most obvious one is The Thing.
Yes.
The Thing is very obvious.
Very much so.
But The Thing is based on a book called Who Goes There, which has very obviously been influenced by the book of this. So it's weird how ahead of its time it actually is, and it's updated here and made more modern here in this script, but there's not that much.
It's made a lot more blockbustery in this script.
Yeah. It reminded me of two films. It reminded me of The Thing and of Prometheus. They were the two that really jumped out to me, but a much, much better version of Prometheus.
Well, actually, that's what the second point I was going to get into, which is that, to go into the context, this was Guillermo del Toro's kind of dream project to make, and that he was originally set to make it before Pacific Rim, as in they'd gone through all of the production.
Yeah, didn't he get... The news got broken to him, when he was location scouting or something, didn't it?
Yes, it was 1 week before they were going to go into the offices to, get everything done. Yeah. They had gone to, the borders of Canada, they'd found locations, they were months into pre-production. I think, I remember they had 300 individual sketches for the production design. They had James Cameron on to produce, they had Tom Cruise to star, which I wouldn't agree with.
No.
But star power to bring in, and it was planned to have a $150 million budget. And then the rug got pulled out of them at the last moment, as Guillermo kind of admits in a lot of the interviews, is that he just refused to lie about the fact that he wanted to make it an R. Yeah. And he says in interviews, I could have easily lied and said it would be a PG-13 and then made it an R, and done a director's cut, or that's implied that the director's cut and the real version. Yeah. But he just didn't He's just told them it's going to be in art. And to be honest, I don't know how... He said that they also loved the script, and I don't see how you could look at this script and say it's a PG-13 in any iteration.
No.
One of the reasons that they also think that this film was not made was because it would come out just after Prometheus. And the similarities are rather close, and I think they get closer as you go on.
Definitely.
But so very close to being produced. Then it got pulled out from under him, so he went on to do Pacific Rim, and then I think that led on to all the production issues with The Hobbit. So Guillermo Del Toro has not had a very good, a very happy career with big blockbuster films. Whenever they bring it up occasionally in interviews, it's always just him saying, "Yeah, this is a passion project. I'd love to make it in the future," but the chances of that are
I'd love for him to
minimally
make
slim.
it, but I think
I would absolutely love for him to make it.
It's for me. There are many different factors for why I think this will never ever get made. At least not in the form that it's in. Number one is it would be expensive, and I know that they're happy to do R-rated films now, but they're not going to do an R-rated film that requires all this production design, this massive scale, all of the visual effects that this would entail. Like this needs the budget of like a summer blockbuster, but with the freedom of an R-rated creature feature, which isn't going to happen. Secondly, it's like it doesn't have any kind of angle for like teens, which I think they want. Like it's all a load of old men on a boat. There's no like love story or anything like that to hook in a younger crowd. And creature features.
I think that you could angle it towards a horror with marketing material if you wanted, but I think that would also lead into the same people that got disappointed with Annihilation earlier this year, where they go in for a horror film or a thriller, and then they get an art house film.
And the thing is that people, like, creature feature films, for whatever reason, don't seem to sell or take off. They seem to be more niche than they have any reason to be. And I think that something like this, which is nihilistic, a bit weird.
Yes.
And it is a downer in the sense that there's nothing optimistic or nothing really happy happens in the entire thing. It wouldn't get made. And if it did get made, it would be severely changed to the point where I wouldn't want it to get made.
I'm trying to think if there is any happy moments, and to be honest, I think there's one joke where they're all happy, and that's immediately before something sad.
And if anything happy does happen, it's just because it's going to be followed by tragedy. It's just to set up inevitable tragedy later.
Shall we get into the script then?
Sure.
It starts, we're in 1939, and it's just a bunch of fishermen fishing, doing their jobs, and then suddenly a giant ship just comes out of the fog, and it has written on its side, Arkham, the Arkham. Cut forward to a patrol boat kind of climbing onto the ship, searching the ship, and as they go through, there's just bloodstains all over the ship, limbs just strewn about. There are mummified dogs, like, attached to the walls, which is unusual, and they find a bag with a can of film cans that say Antarctic Expedition 1930, so 9 years prior. They find a locked room, they open it, and inside is a man, again, kind of like the dogs cocooned up against the wall, like melding with the wall.
It's a bit like Alien, you know, like when you're going through like the alien nest.
In the corner is they describe him as just...
Wild man.
Wild man, yeah. And he comes at them with an axe, because they go up to the guy that's against the wall, and he runs at them saying, "Don't touch him." He swipes two of them with the axe, and they shoot him to subdue him. Cut to a pier, and a British HMS Moonstone has docked, and the captain gets out and is basically told, "Your next mission is to go and find what happened to the Arkham." He's like, "Oh, that went missing years ago," and he said, "Yes, but we've just found it today. We have one of its crew alive." And they take him to the mental institute, and there's just the very classic, like, padded cell. And the guy's whimpering in there. The captain says, like, "This is useless. I don't see what the point in this is." His console says, like, "You need to go to Antarctica." And at that, the wild man, like, picks up and goes, "Don't go to Antarctica, don't go to Antarctica," and then starts telling his story.
Yes, this is a framing device. So they find this crazy guy in a boat, and then someone else who's also sailing to Antarctica. He's pressed for time because there's something to do. It's set during World War II at this point because we're in 1939.
Yes.
So there's like a sort of tie into the war that gives him urgency. So he doesn't want to hear this story, but he's got to because he's been commanded to, like, hear it out. So that's the framing device, as the crazy stranger starts explaining what happened to him and how he ended up on that weird body horror ship.
And there's also a brief moment where you go into the strange man's perspective. In the first line that I thought where, as you mentioned before we were recording, I had to Google words. Because they were really interestingly written, and it's in a brutal sudden shotcut, his face and chest extrude in a mass of hungry, wet pseudopods that whip wildly in the air.
Pseudopods. That was one of the ones I did too. I looked up pseudopods.
But it's a cool description, because you can visualise it instantly, though, once you understand what the word means.
It's very, evocatively written, almost like a book at times. The descriptions aren't as cold and matter-of-fact as you normally get with a script, where they just say, here is this, and it gives you as much information as you need. It takes the time to sort of set the scene and build atmosphere in the way that you would associate with a book.
Yes.
And I liked that. It made it a lot more fun to read. Anyway.
Yes, we've gotten, obviously we're just skimming through the general plot of it, but, all the beginning section of them going through the boat and, the ship emerging from the fog, and it continues throughout the entire script, but it's all very, viscerally and kind of almost poetically told at points.
There are definitely parts that are, yeah.
But it never gets, I never found it to be, a slog at any point, as in I never felt like they were deliberately slowing down to be artistic. It felt like every single word that they chose were just...
They were just finding better ways of... Because there's a danger, I think, if they didn't do that this script could get a bit repetitive. Because towards the end, it does start to become a repeated series of chase scenes where they need to come up with variations of a big squid monster jumps out and attacks someone. But they keep finding different ways to actually articulate that so that it doesn't become boring to read. I get that it's meant to be a film and it's a script and this is not how it is meant to be consumed, but it's nice.
It was enjoyable to read, more so than a lot of other scripts. Now we're back into the strange man's story, and he introduces himself as Dyer, William Dyer.
Was one of my few problems with the script. I didn't have many. I really liked it, but one of my few problems was I had a bit of an Alien Engineers situation where who? What? Why are there so many of them? And do there need to be so many of them? This scene, I've scribbled down so many notes just to remind myself who is who, so that I can flick back to it and go, yeah, because I had to keep turning back to remember who the people actually are. There's only a handful, though, that I think you really need to know.
Yes, that's the problem, I think, is that there's a lot of characters that are given names and dismissed quite quickly. But to be honest, I agree with the Alien Engineers thing, where there is a slew of characters. Almost, it feels like more than Alien Engineers.
I think so, because there's a big ship crew rather than a spaceship crew, which can be lesser, I suppose.
I think, I'm just looking at the names now. So in this, first scene in a flower garden, these scientists are stood at the front, they're getting photos taken by the press, and it introduces you to the scientific team for the expedition. Yeah. So it is William Dyer, the protagonist.
So he's the crazy man.
Atwood, Peabody, Fowler, Dyer, and Lake.
Yeah.
And, that is 7 characters in total in the one scene, and...
They are introduced in quick succession. It's like every line.
And while I did find that in many ways it was an improvement on the Alien Isolation, in that I felt like they never took any character aside and said, this character is like this, except for maybe Lake in this group, who's the leader. I imagined him a lot like Hammond. I imagined him a lot like Hammond
I can see what you mean, yeah. So
he's funding it. Well, he's like the leader, but I found that they introduced them quite well with their types, more so than Alien Engineers.
Oh, yeah. Like I said, I had flashbacks in the sense that it was getting there, but it was not that bad, because I do know who these people are, at least some of them.
Yeah,
so there's Dyer, who is the main character, and he's introduced, it says he's 25 and unrecognisably healthy and handsome, so we know that something bad has happened to him. He's a geologist, which that is an important part of his character. There is Lake, as you said, who's funding it, and he's kind of like Dyer's mentor. And he's very controlling. He's ambitious, but he wants everyone else to basically fuel his ambition. And that's like his character trait. There are the 2 camera people, which...
Oh, that's in this scene as well. That's even
they're
more.
here too, yeah. Let's see what I mean?
Atwood's kind of like the snarky one, Peabody's like the SWAT, Fowler is the religious one.
Atwood is the religious one.
But he's also slightly snarky, isn't he? Because he's the one that cracks the very few amount of jokes in this film.
He is, yes.
So that means Fowler. I have nothing for Fowler.
No, neither do I, but I don't remember him being that important. Danforth, who is the friend.
You've got the cinematographer brothers, where it's the older one that actually mans the camera, and the younger one, which is assistant, like his cute assistant. Yeah, it's just a lot of characters all at once.
But I think if we just reduce it for our sake to
Yes.
Dyer, main character, Danforth, his friend, Lake, the one in charge, and Atwood, the religious one. And then if we just say, like, if other people become relevant, we can introduce them then.
Yes.
So Lake's a Darwinist, so they're all different types of scientists, which is sort of relevant. And Lake is wanting to take them on this expedition to Antarctica, but Dyer gets called aside by his girlfriend, whose name is Anne? I got that right? Anne.
He approaches her, she turns, and she's very pregnant. Anne just says, like, I'm leaving right now for Providence. She wants him to leave this expedition, and he says, okay, I agree with you. I'll go and tell Lake right now. And he goes off with him, and Lake says, like, oh, sure, but just 1 second, come with me to look at this thing.
I liked how they set up the dynamic between Lake and Dyer, because they don't ever sort of say, Lake is controlling. They just let you piece it together through little things. Like when Anne first shows up and Dyer goes outside, it just says in parentheses that Lake notices this. Yes. And that's like that just tells you that
that tells you everything you need to know about.
Yeah, that he sees this and knows that he has to do something to stop it. And there's lots of little things like that where they economically establish that dynamic, but not just that dynamic, other ones. Like there's a bit where Lake's talking to Peabody, and there's just a little reference to how Lake asks him to do something and he obediently takes his cue. And it's just little things like that where it doesn't have Lake act like an overt arsehole, nor does it resort to a character telling you, like, oh, Lake wants to keep you around, so he's going to do this and that to make sure that you're under his thumb. It just puts in little details and lets you fill in the blanks.
If I had to think of another word after, like, atmospheric and all of that for describing the script, economic, I think, is a very good way of putting it, because it's a very quick script. It's only 108 pages. For the amount of story that we put in, it's quite a lot. Lake takes him up to this natural science room where it's full of like skeletons and fossils, takes him into a side room where he shows a massive fossil of this monstrous creature it's described as.
Yes.
It's just described as vaguely humanoid and fossilized. Lake says, oh, this was from an expedition that we lied about that was actually fruitful when we said there was nothing there. We can dig up further evidence if we just go to Antarctica. Dyer, his wife, is completely gone from his mind. Now he's just focusing entirely on the fossil in front of him, and as Lake looks out the window, he sees Anne, the wife, leave the party, and he doesn't say anything. So again, like another very subtle note of that. And then we cut straight to the expedition going off. It's a massive, massive ship, like tanker. And an important note is just that there are 2 planes on it, as well as a bunch of mining equipment.
So it introduces it with voiceover to kind of cut you in halfway through the expedition.
Yes, because we've got even more characters.
Yes, even more characters. And the first thing is that everyone's sat around like waiting for mail from home. And obviously Dyer doesn't get any, because his wife is mad at him. This is just a little reference, but you know how I like to point out when I've read things. Danforth is reading the narrative of Arthur Gordon Pym, which is a book I've read. And that is a book about a bunch of people who go out into the Antarctic on an expedition and end up in a weird time vortex, and they see a strange cloaked man who torments them along the way. Which is, I think...
That's oddly specific, yeah.
Oddly specific, yeah.
And that is from around the same time period as well.
It was a couple of years before the book of this was written.
Oh, interesting.
And it has a similar ending We won't talk about the ending yet, but it has a similar ending too.
Because I think that takes stuff that wasn't actually originally in Mountains of Madness, because this does change the ending of the book quite a bit.
They introduce you, like you say, to thousands of new characters, and also to the geography of this ship.
Yes.
But the way they do that is they have Pip, who is the younger brother of the cinematographer duo, and he like runs through the ship and the camera follows him from like
it's cinematic
deck to deck. It's a bit like the Goodfellas thing when they go through the club, like it shows you the entire world and everyone that you need to know through his journey. So he runs like through the various decks, through the galley, through the kennels, where we meet Larson, who felt like such a Guillermo Del Toro character, because he's got a hearing aid, which is one of like Guillermo del Toro's things, is that a lot of his characters like have those kind of lacks, like they either have like false legs or they're mute. There's always people who've got artificial extensions or replacements of things themselves. So he looks after the dogs, and he's like a very typical man. He doesn't like the scientists or anything like that, and everything's really simple to him. Pip asks him, your dogs, will they sense a difference down here instead of being in Canada? And he says, ice is ice and dogs is dogs, which is like, that's his character. Everything's black and white, simple.
Yeah, simple, compared to all the scientists.
Yeah. There's also another one, Gunnarsson, who is also with him. They look after the dogs together.
And as Harrison was saying, you are introduced to other characters like Daniels, Sumner, and Gordon, and things like that as he runs through the ship. Who the hell are they? But again, yeah, exactly.
I don't remember them.
They are characters that...
It's just dead meat. It's just dead... we meet Dead Meat 2, and Dead Meat 3.
Yeah, I was going to say, we meet a couple red shirts along the way.
Yeah.
But they come in at various points of importance. It's just about their voyage, them going on with like prepping research. It comes to New Year's. Lake is up on the bow of the ship, and the captain comes up to him and says, "We've got a telegram. Dyer's wife has died in childbirth." The captain says, "Oh, I'll go tell him," and he's like, "No, leave this to me. I'll find a proper time to tell him," and tucks it away.
So he intercepts the message and basically hides it from him because he wants Dyer to be focused on what they're doing. That Lake's already had a bit of a monologue where he explained how important it was to him that he has a legacy, because his grandfather has like a wing in this museum named after him and all this stuff. So like he comes from a lineage where everyone's done something important and he wants to do something important. And I did get the sense that whilst he is manipulating Dyer, I think he also wants Dyer to succeed.
Yes, it was honest.
Yeah,
I think.
Like he has a mentorly relationship with him. And even though he is blatantly manipulating him, blatantly doing things that are morally wrong just to get Dyer to stick around and to do things with him, I do think that he actually wants the best. He wants him to succeed. And he thinks that like this woman is gonna ruin you, and you need to be you're meant for more than that. And so I think there is, like you said, honesty there, but also it is self-serving at the same time. It was good. It was complex. It wasn't like Wonder Woman. It was this script had characters.
On thinking about it, I wouldn't say so much the term honest as maybe earnest.
Yes.
Because he will lie to him, but he thinks that he's doing it for his own good. Now we get into it's just more of the them going along on the ship, and Dyer has a dream sequence. He wakes up and he is in just a regular house where he sees Anne rocking the cradle in another room, and she kind of half closes the door so you can just see a shadow. He looks down at his feet and suddenly snow starts seeping out from the floorboards. He looks back to the door again, and the shadow of Anne is kind of warping into a monster, which become relevant later on. And the gust of wind blows the house away, and he looks out onto the horizon of this vast like snowscape, and there is a man, just a figure in furs, standing there that slowly walks towards him, and Dyer wakes up.
You missed one other thing, which is that the baby is also just a bunch of tentacles in the crib.
Yes, yeah.
The baby is a weird tentacly monster. And Dyer's voiceover says, like, and now we're getting into the second act. Because he says something like, I awoke from that nightmare and into a real one, or something like that. So it was like...
No, that's exactly what he said.
So we have, like, this nice little ominous sequence where everyone's having fun on New Year's, whilst Atwood is giving, like, a prayer, thanking God and everything. And it's all building up to, we know something bad's going to happen. Here's the last happy moments that these people had. Very nice. Very, very good.
He wakes up from this dream foreboding sequence and he goes out into the rest of the ship. Sailors are face down at the tables.
Yeah.
Their meals that they're eating have rotten in front of them. And the engines are kind of at full throttle, just unmaintained, and the ship is going wild.
Mm-hmm.
They burst out onto the main deck and they are just about to crash into the ice. Dyer just starts yelling and he wakes up some of the crew and they eventually try to reclaim control of the ship.
An interesting part where everything starts to freeze instantly. The captain touches the railings or something and his hand is frozen instantly.
And little strange things like a compass is perpetually spinning.
Yeah.
And I believe the hull of the Arkham is pierced by something. And so the ship starts filling up with water itself, and the crew are slowly trying to close off different sections of the ship to stop the flooding from getting too far. Just as the ship finally comes to a standstill between two slices of ice, I believe, it's the fog lifts and they look out, and it is the titular Mountains of Madness.
It's like when they arrive at Skull Island.
Yes,
that's how I was envisioning it. It was very similar to King Kong. The ship starts goes through fog, which is the same, and there's a bit of a crash, but everyone's okay, and they end up, as you said, at the Mountains of Madness. Yeah. A dreamlike range of mountains surrounds them. Sharp imperial peaks recede in jagged ranks, bathed in low, slanting sunbeams. 2 distant volcanoes send smoke into a vault of purplish sky glowing with ice clouds. See, look, it sounds nice. They write it, and it sounds like a book.
Yeah.
There's two cinematographer people, they're filming it.
As we get to this scene, it shows them filming it, and then it cuts back to the present day where the Admiral is watching that footage. But it seems vaguely pointless. I think it's just to show the fact that stuff has come back from this, and that that there is evidence that it is real.
Everyone gets off, and they're trying to get themselves free from the ice. They're labouring around the ship, chopping it with picks and axes, but it's freezing over faster than they can cut it free. And then Captain Douglas goes, "I'm gonna go get the welding torch," which I thought was kind of funny. The axes aren't working, so I'm just gonna get a torch to try and look at an upgrade.
Just to further evidence of weird stuff happening, Dyer kind of goes into the laboratory and says, "Everyone look at your watches," and they've all frozen on 6:14 a.m. on a date weeks ahead in the future, further concluding what the audience already has guessed, which is that they've had a massive time gap.
Time is going weird, hence why ice is freezing so fast. Hence why everyone's sort of fallen asleep, and everyone looks more haggard. When they look at this thing with the watches, when they realise something's going wrong with their watches, they actually say a bleak pause as they look at each other, aware of their haggard faces, which is when they basically put 2 and 2 together and realise that something's going weird with time around here.
Although, to be honest, Lake just seems not that impressed with it. He just wants to get on with the main bulk of the work.
I liked him because he was eager to see monsters like I was. That was his... Because he mentions something that he finds this previously thought to be extinct marine animal, and he's like, whatever, it's not a monster, I don't care.
Another point that we kind of just I didn't mention was that there is a second ship that was going along with them called the Miskatonic. Yeah. And they've completely lost contact with that. And then it's continuing this thing of they're trying to get the ship free. They go underneath the ship to kind of cut away with the thing that is piercing it, and it is they describe it as an 8-foot green obelisk, and which intricately carved, it's got pictograms on it. And they go out through the hole to look further, and they describe the entire seabed as full of these spikes, they're almost like a sea of black teeth, I think is how they describe it.
So this is when the first Prometheus comparison starts to come in. They take these this obelisk, one of these obelisks, up onto the boat, and it's basically a coffin.
Yeah, Pip says, "Oh, this freaks me out, it looks like a coffin," and then Lake's like, "Wait a second," and he jams a crowbar in and jacks it open, and then there is one of the fossilised creatures. It is in that tooth, that obelisk, and they crack it, and there's like a sea of fluids, and it opens up, and it is like kind of similar to, it was kind of described similar to like the creators in Prometheus, like it was a pale humanoid creature. Meanwhile, on the ship, the two dog guys are looking out onto the plains, and there is like a field of penguins out in the distance.
This was... I was reading this part and was like, I love this. This is amazing. This was one of my favourite moments that we've read so far, because it was so bizarre and weird and kind of stupid, but at the same time...
It's very stupid.
It's
the penguins are in the original book.
Yeah, they are. They are.
The huge penguins, albinos, they have sickly white translucent skin, webbed with bluish veins. The wings are abhorrent, malformed and elongated, not unlike paws, and their eyes are covered by thick, milky cataracts. So they are just close to death doors penguins.
Yes. I was thinking as soon as I read this, if this film got made, I would love to have one of those pop vinyl figures of one of these sickly malformed penguins.
Yeah, I bet fans would love sickly malformed penguin toys, yeah. The two dog guys are like, well, that looks like meat, we'll kill it for the dogs. Like, we'll go off and hunt these things. They creep up to the penguins. As the two dog guys go out to reach the penguins, they cross over a fault line, which is about half a mile long around the ship. They get to a ridge. Gunnison pulls out his rifle and shoots one of the penguins in the head, and the rest of the penguins don't even react. They just kind of look at it and keep going.
And this is intercut, so you have to...
Yeah, this is intercut with the bit that you just mentioned before, where they are cracking open the obelisk.
Danforth has gone, oh shit, I recognise these, and runs to his bookshelf, and he goes like skimming through it to find a very particular tome, a leather-bound volume that he opens up, and he goes like, oh, Jesus, and the book is filled with all the runes and all the symbols that are on the obelisk, on the coffin.
Meanwhile, the scientific crew are performing like a dissection of the creature. It has 5 radiating lobes instead of a brain. It actually has wings, like 7-foot-long wings in the arm span. Like, it has 3 eyelids as well. Like, it's just basically going through and just saying it's strange.
Meanwhile, a storm kicking off outside, which was another part where it started to remind me of Prometheus. In Prometheus, they find an engineer.
Yes.
Meanwhile, 2 other guys are off, and they come across something weird. This time it's a penguin instead of the weird little snake monster. And then they get caught off by a storm.
And we're cutting back to the 2 penguin hunters, the dog guys, and they cut open the penguin, and it's just like rancid. Its internal organs spill out, and it's interestingly, they describe it as more geometric than organic. Just find that interesting to see on screen what they kind of meant by that. Larson is like cutting up the penguin, and Gunnison noticed that there's actually a fence around this area, so they are actually almost like livestock for whatever was around here. All of a sudden, the penguins turn their heads to look in one direction, and there is something moving in the fog. The 2 dogs run off to attack it, and they hear shredding sounds, and in every horror film, the sad dog dying sounds. But this one, I think, was even more effective than... And again, that's a very close thing to The Thing.
A chorus of whining and yelps is actually what it says.
Larson runs off to see the dog. He sees half a dog dragging itself with its intestines trailing on the ground.
Smearing the snow. I like the description.
Suddenly the intestines of the dogs turn into tendrils and start flailing around and writhing. They turn into claws and start attacking Larson.
Yeah, so the thing's dragging itself by its intestines. Its intestines shoot up into tendrils. The neck propels outwards, growing a series of hungry mouths. A fleshy tongue attaches to Gunnison and lifts him up in the air. His gun goes off, but he's already, like, fusing to it. So if you've seen The Thing, that's basically what The Thing does. It's grabbed him, and he's being, like, absorbed and fused with the creature.
Larson shoots him with his shotgun, and the thing just fixes itself. And so he's like, oh god. And he runs off.
He loses his hearing aid.
In front of him. Yes, he loses his hearing aid.
Stumbles and losing his hearing. It's Chekhov's hearing aid. It's like they didn't introduce it for nothing. It's important.
And this massive shape looms over him, and it is the Miskatonic, which is a name I find increasingly harder to say for some reason.
It's the sister ship.
Yeah, and it's just clearly like nothing's there. It's just blanketed in snow. But the thing's still coming at him. He shoots it again to no effect, and so Larson takes like the one chance that he can, and he shoots point blank at the floor, makes a hole in the ice, and he falls down. The creature kind of goes to attack him, and it reels back at the water as the water kind of burns it.
Yes. So a couple of things that I like here. Firstly, I like that it's like a blistering storm, so the characters can't see anything. And so then to put the one guy who's deaf in there, I think that's a fun horror scenario. Secondly, when he shoots it, I like what happens because it regrows and reattaches itself mid-air. So he like shoots it in half, and then it kind of refuses before it's even hit the ground. And then, as you said, he goes underwater. It tries to follow him, but upon touching the water, it kind of like recoils and freaks out. It sizzles because of the water, doesn't it?
Larson kind of tries to swim away, and he shoots another hole up, goes up for breath, and then the monster still follows him, so he has to go back down again.
Yeah. There's a really good image where he's swimming away underneath, and you can just see like a dark... Because obviously when you're underneath ice, it's only a translucent kind of surface, so you can kind of see things at the top, but not properly. So he's swimming under the ice and can see like a shape just following him on up above. I thought that was so cool. And you know what was really great about
imagery.
this? Do you know what was really good about this? Compared to almost everything else we've read, I understood what was happening consistently. Which, when a lot of the time when even the good scripts we've done, like Shadow Company or
Shadow Company was the best for action so far.
Yeah.
Up until this point.
They get confusing as soon as stuff starts to happen. Either geographically disorienting or just unclear in terms of what people are actually doing. But here, I was following perfectly. They run out into the ice. Gunnarsson, or whatever his name was, gets attacked. Larson shoots himself, falls under the ice, swims away, shoots up again to get a breath, and then dives back down. Very clear.
And then we cut away, so we don't know what happened to Larson.
We cut back to where Danforth, who's been looking through this book, and he found oh my god, he found the exposition book, which is the Necronomicon. What he explains is that there were makers. So if to put this into the Prometheus comparison, there are engineers, but here they're called the Old Ones. And they came down from the stars when the Earth was relatively new. There's like references to time and space going screwy around them. It breaks down their alphabet and all this stuff. And Atwood, the religious one, is like, you can't be taking this seriously. Like, that book, to him, the Necronomicon is obviously heresy. He's all about the Bible, so he's like, this is stupid. But Lake, the Darwinist of all people, is like, no, it's good. It's a good book.
One thing I did forget to mention is in the like mountains, they see like little geometric shapes in the distance, and they have figured that is kind of like a city of some sort. And so they want to get into the planes and head off.
It did feel, to me, it felt... We've talked about how this is quite well paced, comparatively. This was one of the parts where I felt the pacing felt too quick, or too abrupt.
Yes.
Because
I would say that it does feel like that at moments.
Danforth goes, oh look, this thing looks like this thing from the Necronomicon. And then Lake instantly goes, well, it could be that they're doing something with a time vortex. We should go look at that. And it's like, what woman?
They probably eat time, is what he says.
And he's like, I feel like I skipped some of his thought process there. Like, it just went from, I recognise this thing in a book, to, well, obviously they're controlling time, so we better check out that city up there. And Atwood quite reasonably says, hang on, aren't you jumping the gun a bit? And Lake goes, well, what's your explanation then? Mass hysteria? And I went, well, yeah, that makes more sense. Oh, we should point out as well, Lake and Atwood have a bit of an argument, because Lake, I guess as a Darwinist it makes sense, Lake is always taunting Atwood about his religious belief. No one else really makes a thing of it, but Lake is constantly saying, your religion is stupid. God is stupid. Your beloved Jesus has nothing to do with this. Shut up with your Bible. So there's they butt heads, and that does come up again later.
Lake is standing by the fossil. They need to get to the plane, but he's still enamored with the fossil. Dyer's kind of like, we got to get on the plane. Come on. And Lake says, "Are you glad you came along?" Like he's saying, "Do you not like me as much as I like you?" He's kind of hurt that he's not as excited about it as he is.
Yeah.
Dyer says, "Oh, it's just a bit overwhelming," and Lake just goes, "Oh, I see. Well, there's something I think you should see then," and he hands him the key to a lockbox in his room. And Dyer goes and he finds the letter saying that his wife is dead.
And he returns, all pissed off.
They are up on the bow of the ship now, where they're just waiting to get onto the planes. Dyer comes up and just socks Lake in the face.
Yeah. and Lake just goes, "It's not my fault, I didn't kill her." As if, like, that's his defense.
And Lake just says, "You know what your priorities were, you just won't admit it. You chose what was best for you." To which Dyer says, "Everything's a distraction." He kind of gets a bit too lofty with this. He just goes, "Everything's a distraction. Art, poetry, love, human lives. You're saying you've led us to where? Lunacy and death?" Clearly just trying to set off that this is a suicide mission, really.
For the people getting on the plane.
And the teams, the long list of names. Boudreaux, Daniels and Pip, which are two characters you don't need to know about, and the cinematographer guys go on plane A. Sumner, Atwood, Gordon, Danforth, and Peabody go in the
religious
plane B.
religious guys and dead meat go on plane B.
Yes, exactly, yes. They go off in the plane, and they look down and you can see even more the fault line that is around the ship.
They do try to give them a bit of character while they're in the plane. Like, they try to teach you a bit about Peabody, because he's afraid of flying, and Danforth has this moment where he, like, tries to comfort him by, like, getting Peabody to talk about the things that he knows to distract him. And that felt like that was an attempt to get me to remember Peabody's name, but I've got to be honest, I didn't. So
all the characterization, like I know we praised the subtle bits right at the beginning, but it never really gets anywhere past that. It just
only Lake and Atwood, I think. Lake, Atwood, and Dyer, which is why we mentioned them. Everyone else is introduced and then killed. That's
like some characters I understand, like they are side characters, like the cinematographer and his brother, completely fine with how little they had to do because they're just there to be more bodies, but because they had a clear job and one was a kid, I remembered them more.
It could have been easier if they just gave them profession names, because if they were given like names like, I don't know, Scientist 1 or something, then I wouldn't mind, because I wouldn't be struggling to remember their name. But because I'm looking at names, I'm like, who do I have to remember? Who's important? But if it was just Scientist 1, I'd be like, okay, he doesn't matter.
Like, 3 of the characters literally just exist to die, and they are named, and they have occasional lines which don't, like you said, it kind of distracts. In such a lean script, it still is distracting. Mm-hmm. They head off on the planes, and suddenly they have like another time skip, and the mountain that they were heading towards is right in front of them, and they have to pull up, and it's a whole thing. Plane A goes down, and they are now over. They've gone through into this valley, and they can look down, and they can see that there is a city. There's alien architecture, indescribably ancient and strange. The buildings vary in size, evidencing innumerable honeycombed compartments, wide ramps, and hanging terraces. Yeah, again,
honeycombed.
It's interesting. It's just it's the right amount of description to make it very easy to picture, but without being too masturbatory.
Can I just say, so they fly over this, and inevitably the planes crash. I think that's
yes.
No one's going to be surprised if I say that the planes crash. How many plane crashes have we read?
Yes. Every single film seems to have a plane crash.
So, Island of Dr. Moreau was it a plane crash? I think it opened with a plane crash. Wonder Woman opened with a plane crash. Alien Engineers and Passengers had spaceship crashes. There may or may not have been a helicopter crash in Shadow Company. I swear it is the only one that does not have some kind of aerial crash. I feel like I've got all the tools that I could ever possibly need for writing a good crash scene here.
Yes.
Between all of these.
You've read so many now. Yeah. But this crash is very important because it kills off Sumner. And they make a point of it because it's the only character that dies that they hold like a mini funeral for.
So they crash in the middle of the city, don't they?
Yes.
They crash in the middle of the city, which it says is impossible to gauge. Which I think is one of the things that it keeps coming back to with the descriptions, is everything's like immense and unknowable.
Yes, yeah.
It's that kind of eldritch unknown, which is what I think that is like Lovecraft's thing. I'm sure Lovecraft is the one who had that famous quote about how like horror is about fear and fear is about the unknown or something. And that's what all of his stuff is about, is all this immense, epic, but ultimately completely unknowable forces and stuff like that. So the city is just this necropolis that's completely empty, and you don't know what any of it is or what any of the buildings actually are, but that's sort of the point.
As the planes were flying over, there's a side shot where it was Gunnison standing in the ice, and he looks
Gunnison
up at the
is
planes.
one of the dog man who did die. He's the one who did get... I'm saying that for the audience, not for us, because we read this, so we have more excuse to know the names. Gunnison is the guy who got attacked by the dog and fused into it, the Thing style.
Yes.
And he's now heading for the ship.
After the plane crash, we cut back to the ship. They look out and they see, oh look, it's Gunnison. Let's go and save him. And they bring him in. He is talking, like he is vaguely like a person, and they take him into the infirmary, and he says, I can't feel my fingers, I'm numb, and they say, oh, you haven't got frostbite, like you shouldn't be feeling that. It's slightly comedic in that the moment they all turn away, his face kind of goes liquidy, and then when they turn back, he's back to normal again. Yeah, now he is in the infirmary and not himself.
So, meanwhile, Dyer didn't actually get on the plane because he was pissed off about his wife and his kid. Not about them dying. I mean, he was pissed off at Lake for hiding that from him. And he's like sat brooding, listening to a song that has already been sort of associated with his wife throughout the script. So that's how we know that he's brooding. It's economical again. And at which point Fowler, your favourite Fowler, runs in and says that he needs some help. Some help from like a sciencey geology point of view, because they find out that whatever these coffins, they've got like an embalming fluid in it that's being used as some kind of deterrent, and so they're like, well, what are these things trying to deter? What were these things afraid of that they were trying to keep away?
We go back to the alien city, and a crew of them have basically just gone around Sumner's body, the most important character, as the Sumner has died, and they are mourning Sumner. One of the characters looks up and he sees that Lake is going just around the city, like he's not even paying attention. So it's Danforth.
Danforth is Dyer's friend. Danforth is the one who is like Dyer's bestie. But Danforth is the one who was reading the narrative of Arthur Gordon Pym, which I've read.
Yes, and he's also the one that was nice to the guy in the plane. Also now he's saying to Lake, like, you should really go down there. One of our parties died. You should show a measure of respect.
I think basically what you should get is that Danforth is nice guy. There's a nice clear quality you can ascribe to him. So yeah, Lake's obsessing over these hieroglyphics, or as they were actually called, cartouches, which I did Google.
Yes.
These are hieroglyphs that are in an oval. Well, the difference between a cartouche and a normal hieroglyph is that a cartouche is referring to a ruler or to royalty. So there you go.
I did not know the definition. I knew the word because of Egypt and everything, but I did not know the difference.
Yes,
that is interesting.
It means it's referring to rulers, which makes sense because it's about these great ones, the great ones, which are the things in the coffins, which are the thing that Lake's come here to find out about. And he's looking through these hieroglyphics, and this is where we get our info dump. So this is actually very important. So he finds out that the Great Ones were scientists, and that they were hungry for knowledge. So Lake kind of feels like he's got commonality with these weird winged aliens, because it's like, they're like me, they're scientists. And they landed on Earth, and they built this city. But actually, they didn't build this city. They used slaves to build the city.
Yes, yes, they kind of skimmed over that part.
The same slaves that are presumably doing these hieroglyphs, I assume. These slaves are called, and he looks in the Necronomicon for this. Right, whatever I say, we've got to commit to this pronunciation for the rest of the podcast.
Oh no, not the first one. Not the first pronunciation.
Shoggoths.
Okay, yeah, no, I would have said Shoggoths as well.
Were like a lesser alien race. So you've got your Great Ones, which are your alien engineers, and you got your Shoggoths, which were the slaves that the aliens...
They specifically created them.
Yes, which is another Prometheus thing. So they created these things, and Lake also infers from the hieroglyphics that these things eventually killed them all off. Which is, that is Prometheus, isn't it? The engineers make the black goo, and then the black goo kills everyone. So that's what happens.
It is very, and that is, again, it's all part of the original book, so obviously Prometheus is still inspired originally from Mountains of Madness, the book. But the important, I think, thing from that is just that the slave race, basically, that were created overthrew the creators, but they were, it describes them as mutable creatures, which... like, if they needed extra arms, eyes, or, like, fingers for the job, they would just grow them, which is why they were perfect slaves, but also implying that they are the monsters that they are currently fighting down on the ice field.
So, for the purpose of clarity, not this isn't in the script, this is just me explaining, because obviously, the person listening to this... I say person because it will be singular. They haven't read it, so there's two types of alien basically. There are the Great Ones, which are slightly more humanoid, and they're the scientists. And then there are the Shoggoths, the slave thing creatures that they made, which wiped out all of the Great Ones in a kind of rebellion. And this is all... Lake pieces this together from hieroglyphs, which I'm very impressed by, considering he does not know their language. He's jumping the gun, but he turns out to be right, so...
Got to give it to him, yeah.
He also mentions that the Shoggoths worshipped an ancient deity, a creature so malevolent that even the Old Ones were afraid. He keeps walking, goes through the plaza, where they find a statue, a pillar, which depicts... Cthulhu, which is the ancient deity. You know Cthulhu. He's in lots of things. He's in memes.
I would say he's the most iconic thing about Lovecraftian horror. I would say.
I looked this up because I was very curious. I don't associate Cthulhu specifically with Lovecraft anymore because he's in so much. He's in South Park and everything. Yeah. So I was like, is Cthulhu like public domain now? Is Cthulhu just something that anyone can use?
Yes. He is.
He is.
Ah,
so
there you go.
Everyone can use Cthulhu.
Even you at home, kids.
Yes. You can use Cthulhu. And so Danforth says, so what was the outcome of this war that you've inferred from a couple of scribblings on a wall? And Lake says, we'll know in time.
Now we cut back to the medical ward, and the doctor's just going around doing his like checkups. And
when you say the medical ward, you mean back...
The infirmary, at the ship.
At the ship, yeah, I thought we should.
And again, in a darkly comedic... like scene as the doctor's going around, Gunnarson's kind of taking on, going up to men one by one and taking them out by his rubbery fingers are melding with men's faces.
The Thing does this in it's when it's let me see if I can remember the Thing names. Blair, I think he sticks his face into a guy. He sticks his hand into a guy's face and kind of melds with it, and the guy's face starts like contorting with like as if the hand has sort of gone underneath his skin. That's basically what this is.
So that is slowly what's happened. So he's taking on everyone one by one in the medical ward. Yes. Dyer and Fowler are doing their little experiments in the scientific section of the ship, and Dyer goes outside into the hallway and he spots someone from the medical ward just standing there, and he goes like, "Hello, you okay?" And this thing starts coming towards him, and we can see from the camera, but Dyer can't see that like the back of him is extending out into tendrils, but obviously that's hidden by him coming toward him. And then Dr. Fowler comes out into the corridor and goes like, "Yes," and then the guy has disappeared. They go out onto the ice field and they go into a tent where they've been keeping the 8 old ones that they've kind of cut out of these stalactites on the floor.
Sorry, could I just... So the gist is that Gunnarsson has been making his way through the crew who are asleep, morphing with them. So he goes through, all secretly, like this isn't something that people are panicked to know about yet. He's just making his way and slowly taking over... Assimilating and taking over the entire crew.
Yeah, so they exit the ship after that like weird encounter that Dyer almost, it seems like he could be hallucinating that. They go out onto the ice field and they have a tent where they've set up the old ones that they've gotten from these black teeth that they described, these things that they've cut them out of, and they are all out on the benches. Dyer goes off onto another room to like get some testing stuff material, and Fowler suddenly starts hearing a noise behind him.
He goes to the radio, where he hears a raspy voice say, Tekaleli, or something like that. But did you also know, Jack, that that's actually a reference?
To what?
It's a reference to the narrative of Arthur Gordon Pym, which is a book I've read. Because, you know, the book...
Because it is in the original as well.
Yeah, it's in the source material of this. It is in H.P. Lovecraft's story. But it's because he meant it as a reference to the narrative of Arthur Gordon Pym. But it's used in a very similar context in that as well. So I just wanted to mention that because it's a nod.
So it's a religious chant in that book as well.
It's in that it is complete nonsense. As in, like there is right. It's that whole book is much more obtuse than this. Like that doesn't give you any answers. Lovecraft gives you some answers. This script gives you more in-depth answers. Gordon Pym gives you no answers.
And Fowler says over the radio, like, Captain, is that you? And there's still static, so clearly implying that the rest of the ship has been slowly taken over.
Well, they definitely get the captain. He goes for the captain, and the shadow on the wall is a coxcomb of boiling tentacles. I had to look up that coxcomb. So, yeah, he definitely gets the captain.
After hearing this radio thing, he hears another noise, which is a scalpel has kind of fallen on the floor, and he goes to pick it up. Behind him, now suddenly are stood up all the old ones. They are upright, and they grab him and snatch the scalpel out of his hand.
They do sound like engineers, actually.
Dyer in the other room starts hearing strange noises coming from the other room, goes in and says like, oh dear God, and the old ones are performing a live autopsy on Fowler, like they are cutting him open and taking him apart. Dyer runs out of the tent into the pure chaos that has been caused by these creatures assimilating with everyone. As the rest of the camp is on fire, people are running from shape-shifting masses of flesh.
There's a few things that I like here. So, number one, I like that when they are dissecting Fowler, the old one has like an inquisitive gaze on its face, so you know that the reason they're doing it is just for the similar reasons to Lake. It is just out of curiosity and knowledge. That's why they're cutting him open.
Yeah, they're not doing it to be cruel.
Secondly, as you say, they run out into this like chaos. And there's a part where it says an old one is running around, crawling on its wings like a bat on land. That was cool.
There was a lot of cool descriptions in this one, because also as he's running through this maze of tents, he looks to the left of him. This is quoting now. To the left of him,
affixed to a globular entity, methodically impaling the frenzied dogs on its spidery legs. A gaping maw at the centre of the Gunnison thing ingests them, dissolving their bodies in gelatinous tissue. So
that was a really cool section.
Yeah. So it's basically at this point what you have is the engineers from Prometheus, but with wings, running around whilst the thing from the thing is just like amassing more and more, like just joining to everything it sees, and then they fight. Then an engineer and a thing fight, because the old one rounds a corner and the two ancient enemies are face to face. Screeching, the Gunnison thing attacks, engulfing its adversary in a tide of flesh. Because obviously the Shoggoths, they were the slaves that uprised against the old ones, so that's why they're ancient enemies.
This scene kind of reminded me of, like, for some reason I was picturing it like the first scene of The Revenant, like, you know, where the camp is attacked, like it's just chaos and walking through that. And amidst all this chaos, Dyer, seeing this fight, he backs off into a nearby tent, and he sees Larson, who he last saw swimming underwater, holding his breath, trying to get away from trying to get away from Gunnison.
Larson's the dog man, the deaf dog man, and he's stuffing burlap sacks. At this point, you don't know why. He's just stuffing them with something, and he basically says, like, "Come with me if you want to live." Is
the equivalent of that? Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so Dyer just helps him shove all the stuff in the bag, and he jumps onto a dog sled. As they are escaping, creatures are coming at them. Larson loads up a shotgun and shoots it, and this time it actually disintegrates them. He cracks the whip, and the dogs start running away, and they slowly go away from the chaos surrounding the ship and off towards the mountains.
So, we're cutting back and forth between the chaos at the camp and the people in the city. The group in the plane have decided they're drawing straws. The ones who draw the long straws, they get to go back to the ship. The ones who draw the short straws, they have to stay behind. So they draw the straws, and one of the cinematographer brothers draws a short straw, but the other doesn't. And they have like this back and forth thing where they're like, oh, you go, no, I don't want you to go without me. The older one has like a valuable watch, and he says, look, if I'll give this to whoever wants to give me their long straw so that I can go with my brother, because he can't cope without me. And no one will actually do it. Even Atwood, the religious one, is like, he looks away. He's ashamed, but he's not willing to do that. But Lake notices this, and he sees an opportunity, and he's like, oh, I'll give up my long straw so that you two can be together. I'll do it for you. I'll, like, you guys be together. This is only right. And, oh, don't worry about me. I don't want your watch. No. Yeah. This is a selfless thing.
He says something like, it's what any good Christian would do.
Yeah, which is a point. See, I told you that him and Atwood have, like, a thing, because that's, like, obviously a jibe at Atwood who wouldn't do it. But Atwood, who, again, because they have this sort of bitter relationship, it's almost like they reminded me a bit of Kyle and Cartman from South Park. Lake is like Cartman in the sense that he, like, everything he does is subtly manipulative, and Kyle's just like, for God's, like, the one person who sees through it all the time. Because Atwood says something along the lines of, like, I know that you're doing this just because you want to stay and see more alien shit. So... That's what happens. Lake sacrifices himself so that he can stay behind because he really wants to. He wants to explore more of the city.
Larson and Dyer, they head off towards the mountains, and Larson heads into like a small hole in the side of the cliff.
This reminded me of Tim Burton Batman, like approaching the Batcave,
right?
Because he's like they're riding along.
So.
They're riding along on the sled, and it looks like they're gonna drive into an ice wall, and that's what Dyer thinks is gonna happen. But slowly, there just becomes this tiny little crevice that they're actually going through into the cave, and it reminded me of that. Maybe that's just me being a fanboy, but it reminded me.
I think that is.
It reminded me of Batman. And they get into this secret little ice cave, which Larson knows about, because I think that's when he was swimming under the ice. I think it led him here.
Yes, yeah.
So after Larson's escape, he inadvertently swam underneath this cave and blasted a hole through and clambered out, and he ended up in this secret safe cave by mistake.
And Dyer is kind of like looking around, and suddenly this penguin appears, and he screams. And Larson's saying, like, shut up, what are you doing? Like, stop making noise. It's just a penguin, the dumbest bird on the planet.
Yeah.
And Dyer is kind of freaking out because
it's a freaky penguin.
These are not penguins. These are husks of penguins.
I liked this bit. This bit made me like Larson.
Yeah. I know you were gonna like this bit. I knew you were really gonna like this bit.
Larson says, like, "Are you okay?" And Dyer goes, "That thing, it," and he can't finish his words. And Larson goes, "Oh, it scared you." And Dyer's, yeah, a little bit. And so Larson just shoots it in the head and goes, there, now go to sleep. I like, that part made me like Larson. That part made Larson my favourite character.
I knew you would like that, yeah. It did make me laugh quite a bit. Also, I just found it funny that it just goes, Dyer turns away and closes his eyes. Like, okay, like, that's problem solved.
I don't know if the script ever, like, actually explicitly says this, but my inference was that the penguins were basically bred as a food source for the Shoggoth thing.
Yes. And while he is sleeping, Dyer has another dream of the Dark Man, which we're now calling him, which is just a guy again in fur.
I kept thinking of Nightman.
He's just a hooded man on the plains of of ice, and Dyer's voiceover that has been explaining this whole story says, "I knew somehow that whatever horror lurked under that hood, if I ever saw it, it would drive me mad." So he's sort of trying to look away from it.
Darkman, incidentally, is one of the few original creations for this script. The Penguins are in the book, the Shoggoths are in the book, Cthulhu's in the book, but not the Darkman.
But also it seems to take inspiration from that other book that you said that you read.
Yes.
Not Heart of Darkness, but the other one.
The narrative of Arthur Gordon Pym, which I've read. Dyer wakes up and Larson teases him for having a bad dream. They basically sit down to do the Terminator scene. You know, in the Terminator where Sarah Connor and Kyle Reese bond over making pipe bombs? That's what this is.
Yes.
They
Right,
bond
yeah.
over what they're doing with the burlap sacks. We mentioned that Larson has those sacks, and he's basically filling them with salt, and he's also putting them in the shells of his shotgun, which is why his gun now kills them, because they're now rock salt rounds. Because when he saw that one jump into the water and retreat, when that one jumped after him in the water and retreated, he concluded that it was actually the salt that was wounding them, not water. And so that's what they're doing. They're basically stocking up on salt weapons to kill the things. And I presume that that's why all of the Great Ones buried themselves underneath the sea, because it's the one place that the Shoggoths couldn't get them.
Yeah, that's never explicitly said, but it's implied just from information that you receive.
And this is one of the points where it also matters that Dyer is a geologist, so he explains why salt might hurt them in some geology babble. Meanwhile, Larson just goes, "In Canada, we use salt to kill leeches," which is like his clear-cut character thing. And I like Larson.
Yeah.
Well, you're about to find out what happens to your favourite characters: Moulton, Gordon, and Kennedy. All your favourites.
Gedney is the cinematography brother,
okay.
So he is one of my favourites, actually. Yeah, they head off in the plane. They come back to the ship, the Arkham. They crash land because no one has plotted out a landing strip for them at all.
Yeah, because there's chaos down there.
Yeah, and they look out and they're like, "Where is everyone?" And then they look out into the distance, and there is just a row of people waiting there. Moulton has got out the plane, and he looks out, and he's like, "What? Why are they just standing around?" And then suddenly there is a scream. Peabody, Gedney, and Pip are in the plane. Pip looks out the window, and then suddenly Gunnison is there. Gedney's like, "Oh, good, it's just Gunnison." And then they look out the front of the plane, and there's another Gunnison, and they turn around, and there's another one and another one. They start attacking through the windshield. They have these massive grins on their faces that seem to take up their entire face, where their entire face is now just rows of teeth, and their arms extend like fleshy vines, and they grab the older brother, Gedney. Pip screams, and they run to the back of the plane to try and get out that way, but it's covered in snow. And Danforth grabs Pip and Daniels, and they escape out the emergency door. As they are running away, you hear Gedney screaming, like, "Pip, don't leave me." And Pip looks back, and Pip runs to his aid, while the other two run
so
off.
the younger brother runs to go help the older brother, but it's a trap!
Yes.
So it says he gets there, and Gedney grabs Pip, or rather, the Gedney thing grabs Pip. And its hungry flesh traps the boy's head. Gedney's face becomes a proboscis full of grinding appendages. His legs are connected to thick tentacles to the thing inside the plane. Like an obscene hand puppet, he rises, still gripping his brother prey. And then the plane's fuselage splits open, and it's ripe with swollen, invading flesh. And basically, at this point, the Shoggoth has become like one. It's become like the Blob. It's like there's many things in it. It's just this big amorphous mass of everything it's consumed.
It can divide into like the things that it has absorbed, like we just saw with it, where it split into multiple Gunnisons. But that's kind of like the thing. That's just to assimilate even more prey and to get on their good side and try to trick them into becoming much more vulnerable. As Danforth and Atwood are running back to the ship, the thing is splitting off. So there's 3 Gunnisons, 3 Gedneys, and combined with dog parts and other creatures just in that mass.
So the survivors of the plane crash, which is Atwood, Danforth, and maybe a couple of red shirts, I don't remember.
Daniels?
Red shirt. So they run into Dyer and Larson, and they have like that Thing paranoia moment,
Yes.
but it doesn't last that long. Like the Thing, that's the whole film. Here, it's a scene where they're like, "Are you a monster? I don't know. Are you a monster?" And they have their version of the Thing blood test. Only here, it's a salt test where Larson basically goes, "Just eat a sack of salt to prove."
Which would be enough to make anyone throw up anyway, but it works in this case.
They sizzle though, don't they? The monsters sizzle and like they like burn on contact with salt. So I guess if they're sick, that's just normal. And I believe Larson says, eat a handful of salt and then we'll see who's who. Which I'm sure that's pretty much exactly what MacReady says. He says we'll see who's who when they're doing the blood test. So they eat it, take a fistful of salt and they gulp it down, cough and retch, and they go, let's see, look, we're human, are you satisfied? But Daniels just watches in silence, and they go like, you too, Daniels, you gotta eat the salt. And Daniels squeals, and his torso explodes into a million tentacles. The fact that he squeals, that's also like the Thing. That's what the Thing does. He goes like...
But I think it squeals. I think that's only squeals when you put the heat to it, though.
Yeah.
But it squeals preemptively and goes to attack, and they shoot it with the assault shotgun and kill it.
Meanwhile, Lake and his group of red shirts, they're exploring the abandoned city. And they come into this, like, biology room. They basically come into the Old Ones' laboratories. It's full of, like, these sculptures of all of their culture and everything that they've done. And then they come across... it's like a... What do they call it? It's almost like a museum of all the things that the Old Ones have created. Bones, so there's, like, dinosaurs... then like mammals, and eventually it builds up, and the things in their museum get progressively more modern. So you start with dinosaurs.
I think they seem to describe it as like a dome above them. These are like pictograms in it, so you can see like dinosaurs are in there, and crustaceans, and birds, and other kind of mammals. And as it kind of slowly builds up, it eventually reveals.
Well, Lake's walking by. They see there's insects, mammals, all these things. And he reads from the Necronomicon, and he says that these beings, on the first day that they were here on Earth, they created birds. On the second day, they created fish. And you know where this is going. They eventually come across a human skeleton, which is grinning. Which I get that it's not literally grinning; it's just a skeleton. But it was a fun little thing. It's creepy. Yeah. And Lake, who was seemingly transitioned from ambitious to full-on, like, nut job, just says, "Oh, I know, it's so humbling, isn't it, to know that we were created by weird bat aliens?" Yes. Like, he takes it very well. He doesn't go like, "Oh my god, that's terrifying." He's just like, "Ah, good."
They hear something from a side room, and they go in, and it's like a great big mechanical machine. Like copper spears are floating overhead, and there is something that is sparking, like a machine that is sparking to the side, and there's just this wave of energy coming from it, like there is debris that is frozen midair, like a photograph. And one guy Gordon goes up.
Sorry, you said Gordon. His name is actually Dead Meat. Why did you call him Gordon?
He wasn't even Gordon, it was Dead Meat 2. Dead Meat 2 walks up and just decides to shove his hand in, and then he disintegrates in front of everyone.
So what it says is he shrivels and basically becomes a mummy. So I think he super ages, is that what happens?
Yes,
it's like he has like an accelerated aging process.
Well, and the way that they kind of prove that is that Lake takes the watch and just throws it towards it.
After the guy's already mummified himself.
And as he throws it, you see the watch speeds up faster and faster and faster until it eventually freezes midair and just stops completely.
Yeah.
They said like, "Oh, this is clearly what's causing the distortions. We have to shut down this machine."
Everything from just having the Necronomicon for less than a day. He's become an expert in Old One civilization.
He's like, "This is clearly a machine that we have to shut down," which they don't bring back. I don't remember.
No,
but,
they don't.
And then a sphere projects a beam of blinding light into his head, and his arms and body become translucent, and he gets a flashback to the story that we already have been told.
It's a bit more explicit.
It's a visualization of it.
So he sees the war that we know about. He also sees at the end a massive thing as tall as the mountains rise up. The flashback machine sort of stops, So yeah, Lake comes to the sort of conclusion that we did, which is he says that the ones that we found under the ship in the coffins, they were heroes and warriors, and they're alive. He realizes now that they're alive, which obviously we know because they've already woken up and started dissecting people. But he's like, we have to warn everyone that they've been underwater as like protection.
Yeah, because they are needed for this ceremony to bring Cthulhu back to life.
Yes. Basically, the Shoggoths need more bodies, and if they do that, they can summon Cthulhu. Is he ever called Cthulhu? I think they just say they're god. I don't think...
Well, it's mentioned Cthulhu. They've already mentioned Cthulhu once in the script. It's just here he doesn't say its name.
Okay.
But, yeah, then there is a massive sound, and a massive Shoggoth explodes from one of the tunnels, and it grabs Peabody, and Peabody's gone now.
Not Peabody...
And then they run down a corridor where 2 meat bags are killed in one go.
Yeah.
Lake is running and he reaches like a burial vault filled with tombs, and then a Shoggoth jumps on him and kills him.
Yes, it drags him off into the distance.
Cut back to the ice cave where we have the last group of survivors from the ship now.
The penguins are waiting in anticipation of something, which is my favourite line in the script. The penguins are waiting in anticipation.
So it's Dyer, Danforth, Atwood, and Larson are the only 4 survivors now.
They see that there are spidery humanoid aberrations crawling over the ship's hull, and they basically come to the conclusion that those things are going to hop on the boat and return to the world, our world. Do you know what this reminds me of? The Thing. When they decide that the Thing is going to go and infect and take over the entire world, and so they decide that they're going to blow everything up even if it kills them, which is exactly what happens here with dynamite. It's exactly the same. They're going to blow up the ship with dynamite just to stop the creatures from leaving the Antarctic.
They go to the secondary ship that was unimportant up until now, the Miskatonic, and they grab dynamite from there, although there's not as much as they would have hoped, because it's like, because of the time things, it's like degraded.
Yeah, it just crumbles into dust, doesn't it?
And they start setting it up along the fault line that was mentioned several times before.
Meanwhile, Atwood goes into the ship's chapel because he's looking for his Bible, and when he's there, he comes across Lake Thing. So the Lake Thing is a bit more humanoid than the others. The others are basically Shoggoths in the forms of whoever they've like assimilated. But the Lake one has a bit of Lake's personality, and he's come specifically for Atwood.
Just to mock him.
Yeah, he's come
just to mock him before killing him.
Yeah, he's come specifically there, and what the Lake Thing says is, Lake is here with us. He wants you to know that it was them, the old ones, who brought life to this planet, not your god. Which is brilliant. How like evil is that this guy learns the etymology of the human race, and the first thing that he wants to do, even after he's been eaten by an alien, is, I want to rub it in that guy's face.
That religious guy, really want to show him up. That's what's worth it.
So Atwood starts like praying, like his prayer before getting eaten, and Lake starts. He wants to rub salt in this wound even more by saying that not only were you created by aliens, but they just created you because they were bored.
Yes,
they were bored, and they gave you like doubt and fears and faith just because it made you more entertaining to watch, like giving characters in a soap opera flaws so that there's more drama, and so like that's the entire reason behind human existence. And then as the guy carries on praying, Lake says, go on, finish your prayer, even though you know now that no one is listening. And he gets consumed by the Lake Thing. I liked this scene.
This is where it gets into the nihilistic stuff.
This is where you realise that the script would never get made as it is here. But it's also where it feels much more like a better version of Prometheus, because that explained in about 2 lines what Prometheus struggled to explain in the entire script. That basically were made by aliens who made us because they were bored and wanted something to watch. He says we're their house pet or something. And it's also dark. It felt like in Prometheus or Alien Engineers, when they talk about that stuff, it feels very dry and philosophical. Like it's just there to give like the film a feeling of weight and importance. But in here, it's to do with the horror. It's a horrible, terrible thing that like our entire existence is so meaningless that were just a distraction for weird bat monsters. It was good. I liked that part.
Because Prometheus, it does try to turn like the creation almost into an epic thing, even though because it's trying to find our origins. But this is kind of
This is incidental. This isn't.
Yes,
They didn't go here looking for this. They came here just
yeah.
for a scientific expedition, and along the way they happened to find out that life is meaningless, which I prefer.
And then Atwood basically just goes back to the rest of the group, and he seems fine because he has been assimilated.
Yes.
We have a tiny flash forward back to the present where the military guy is just like...
I wish it stopped doing that. At this point, I did feel like, please stop.
It was pointless, I think. They basically... It's just so they can say, by the way, Warsaw has fallen, and the captain's just like, yeah, all right, I'll just finish the story, and then I'll go off. Which is completely pointless. They are working on putting all this dynamite down, and they split off into two groups. It's Dyer and Danforth, and Larson and Atwood. Dyer and Danworth see this this ritual going on where they say these
congregation,
giant creature is just around stone monoliths, and they are chanting.
The chanting something Cthulhu, something Cthulhu, and they are like looking at the mountains in expectation, just like the penguins.
Dyer's basically like, we have to explode it now. We have to stop whatever this is doing. And Danforth's like, yes, but the other two guys are over there. Like, I don't care. Like, we've got to do it. And just as they're saying that, Larson and Atwood, they are having a conversation, and then suddenly it reveals that Atwood is like, he's actually been ripping down the wires, like he has been trying to sabotage it.
Atwood's thing is sabotaging the dynamite, and then Larson notices this and says, whatever you are, you're good. You got me. I didn't see that coming, but you don't know shit about explosives. And he takes the shotgun and shoots the dynamite, so it still detonates.
Yeah.
Which was cool
exploding them both and setting off this whole the whole shelf that the Arkham is on, and it starts kind of retracting into the sea. However, all the creatures are running off the ship to obviously trying to escape this water. So Dyer and Danforth run back to the ship in order to escape on the ship. As they're running, they are seeing like some of the creatures sort of boiling from this like seawater kind of lapping up around their legs. They climb up onto the ship as the Arkham is drifting away.
And when they reach the top, they come face to face with they're pursued by one of the spidery shoggoths. They get rid of it, but not in time to turn around and notice the heaving titan Cthulhu is emerging.
Yes.
So they're too late. Cthulhu, they escape, but they're too late. Cthulhu has arisen.
The ritual was complete, They run into the ship to try and escape. The ship now, although it's like filled up with seawater, it's now just like blood red from the amount of disintegrated creatures that are now swilling around in this giant vessel. They're just, running through the ship trying to get to safety. They lock themselves in the storage room just as Cthulhu picks up the entire ship and describes it as like breaking an egg. Dozens of fleshy organs explode, and they just pour out of the cracked halves of the ship into the seawater and just disintegrate.
And the ship turns over 360 degrees as they tumble through the air because the Cthulhu like throws them. And when they land, it damages the integrity of the ship, and water starts rushing in, effectively killing all of the shoggoths because it's saltwater.
That's what I'm getting.
Cthulhu inadvertently kills all of his followers that are on the boat.
Yes, he saves them in some ways, and so they are sat in this dark room, and they think that they have made it, that they have survived the ordeal.
Can I just point out, by the way, that Cthulhu is described as sparkly? I didn't really understand why.
I don't remember that.
Cthulhu is impossibly big, black, sparkling body, throbbing with energy. I think it's that he's like got this sort of weird arcane power running through him.
I don't think he's glittery. No.
Glittery is what it's.
I don't think he's bedazzled. And they think they have survived until Lake steps out from the shadows. And Lake starts monologuing. He starts monologuing about how you've seen the future, you've seen the dark man, you may warn everyone, but no one will believe you, like the old ones gave you your pride, and pride will be your downfall. It turns very Prometheus at the very end.
The dark man, incidentally, he very abruptly explains that the dark man is all of the shoggoths. They're like legion,
right, yes.
And the dark man is the, I suppose, the closest you could call it. Like the way I would, it's like the dark man is proper form, I suppose.
Right.
It's the original.
hive mind.
It's the hive mind, yeah. Not that matters. It's actually largely irrelevant. I think you could cut the Darkman out, and it wouldn't make a difference to anything.
Yes,
These could just.
But I think it's just meant to. I think it's just meant to add to this foreboding dread.
Yeah, it's because the Shoggoths are more like body horror, whereas having the Darkman gives it this eldritch feeling, this more mysterious, mystical, Lovecraftian feeling.
Lake sends out a stalk of his protoplasm, as it's described. And
so
grabs,
Danforth's about to shoot him, and it wraps around the arm that's got the gun in it, so that it can't fire.
Dyer swishes with the axe, cuts off the arm, and then shoots Lake. Lake screams and falls and dies, but Danforth knows that any contact with these is enough to kill you, and so he says, I can feel it changing me, let me choose how I die. And Dyer just apologizes and shoots him. Dyer just collapses, has a panic attack basically, and just then the doorknob opens and men start coming in and flood the room, and it turns out we are back to... It just cuts straight back to the beginning of the film.
Yes.
So that was another time jump for him. And
yeah,
it
so
reveals
he's collapsed on the floor, at which point the people from the beginning, from the framing device, arrive.
Yes.
And he's panicked, and he thinks that they're Shoggoths in disguise, because obviously he has no reason to think they're other humans, which is why he runs up to them and starts flailing at them with an axe. He gets shot, and then he's relieved but after he gets shot, because he realises that they're human. They're not here to absorb him. And so then we're basically caught up, and we're back to the framing device.
Yeah. And Dyer says, this was just yesterday to me. I haven't experienced any time at all.
Can I just interrupt with a slight diversion? That ending is the exact same ending as Gehenna, Where Death Lives. Do you remember that really terrible film?
I remember you talking about it. I don't know if anyone will ever know about it.
It's a really, really awful horror film that I watched really recently, but it has that exact same ending. And I just thought that was weird. It was a very weird coincidence.
And the guy that has been listening to his story stands up and he's like, well, okay, I've wasted time here. And then just leaves. And Dyer's screaming, saying, no, you can't go, please no. And then it cuts to the captain is on his ship heading off to Antarctic. He gets a memo saying William Dyer hanged himself in his cell last night. And they go to the wasteland, the frozen wasteland. This is now the HMS Moonstone. And it's just ravaged. There's nothing there whatsoever, nothing at all. The captain goes into a tent and he comes back out and his entire crew has disappeared. And he looks around going, is anyone here? And then he looks back again, and there is the Dark Man standing there. And as the camera pulls back, we get a quote from the Bible, which is, and at the end of days will come a man that walks like a man, looks like a man, but is not a man. Revelations 5:19.
Why would you quote a Bible in a story that explicitly says that the Bible is meaningless?
I quite liked it because I felt like it was a reference of the Bible is taken from the Necronomicon.
Oh, okay.
So it is basically interpreting. It is showing that Christianity, the Bible, is not wholly original. It's taken from something else. That's what I kind of liked about it.
Okay, I see what you mean. Yeah. Okay.
And also, I quite liked it because it tied it back into something that we actually have in. I haven't heard that Bible quote before, and I think it's quite a cool quote. Mm-hmm. I quite liked it, and it suited the film, the ending, quite well.
Yeah.
And that is Mountains of Madness.
So, overall, it's well written with great descriptions. I think that, as good as it is to read, I think it would be amazing to watch.
Yes, definitely. I think I would prefer watching it, even though it was a great read, and I would say that it's the most interesting script that we've read, and I would say it's the best overall.
I think it was sort of more enjoyable to read at times because the nature of it is that the horror sequences can change up a bit more, and they're more suited to being read. Whereas the stuff in this is a lot of, and then they shoot at a monster, and then they run away from a monster, which is more suited to watch.
this was cooler than it, and it had a lot more interesting horror sequences throughout, and it had a lot of very interesting ideas, but it has the best characters that we've read so far.
That's probably true, yeah. Because that was
it
the
made me
only
actually
sort of...
care for the characters, whereas for this, I was more caring because of what cool stuff comes next, not as opposed to, oh, I care for whoever's going to survive, because I didn't actually care about that in the end.
That's a good way of putting it. I think that the stuff with Lake and the religious guy is probably the most interesting stuff, and if that could have been capitalised on more, that might have been better. But it's very well paced, and I think that to inject much more of that would detract from the cool monster stuff. I liked that it was so much more succinct and so much clearer with all of the stuff that Alien Engineers tried to do.
Yes, it was. This was, I would say, by far the most succinct script. I don't think it's the shortest, but it just barreled through, and it never felt confusing at any point.
It felt like it actually had. Not only was it clearer than Alien Engineers, with all of the same stuff that Alien Engineers tried to do, not only was it more entertaining and fun, but I think it actually had more weight and meaning in the sense that it wasn't so focused on trying to tell you that there was meaning, because it didn't need to, because it actually had answers and a direction. So it wasn't like constantly trying to say, look how important everything is, because it didn't need to, because it actually knew what it was doing. I think the characters are my only problem. There's too many of them, and so they become indistinguishable. And the ones that have the sort of interesting elements to them, they're never developed enough because they're competing with so many others in such an overcrowded script. But
I don't see a problem with so many characters. I just wish that they made it clearer that which ones are unimportant, and then bigged up the roles of the main characters that would eventually be important, because I feel like Nice Guy did not really show up much until it was too late for him to have a proper character building.
Yeah, because his death is the emotional death when Dyer has to kill him, but by then you're like, you're just a guy.
Yeah, you're just not the last girl.
I was more intrigued by the fact that Cthulhu was outside, and I was excited by that.
Because Cthulhu just disappears, like, that's it.
Well, like, Cthulhu does not appear in the book. It's like his arrival is implied.
It's mentioned.
And so I think this is, I don't want to use the word fan service, but I think it was like something where I think Guillermo Del Toro just really wanted to put Cthulhu in there, regardless of whether it needed to.
Well, I think it's also, I can understand the importance of the army character, because I feel like the Cthulhu thing is basically saying World War II is Cthulhu's, like, almost like, you know how with Wonder Woman it was Ares is causing World War One. It's not men, they're not the problem, it's that they've got evil in their hearts or whatever. I think that's kind of basically saying that this is, look, it's the end of days. It doesn't mean that Cthulhu is actually going to come and rip apart cities or anything like that, but it means that the world is slowly
I liked that it had a downbeat ending. I think because it didn't feel like a depressing.
It suits it.
And it's not a depressing ending. It is just a fitting one for this kind of creepy.
It felt interesting
horror story, and I think that it feels of all the ones we've read, I think this feels the most like authored, in the sense that this feels like a Guillermo del Toro thing. It's got so many of his trademarks. It's got, like I said, the character with the hearing aid, who fits in with many other ones. There's always a thing in Guillermo del Toro stories about like religion, because he grew up in a Catholic household and he really hates it. He's like a proper atheist, one of those atheists who hates religion. And so I think he was Lake in this, and he was like, you know what, if I got eaten by a gelatinous alien, I'd want to tell everyone
that's what I'd do, right?
Their god is meaningless. So it feels like a Guillermo del Toro thing. I don't know who Matthew Robbins is, but he did good too, probably.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much for listening. This is I think I would say that this is our most enjoyable series to record. We also have our other podcast, which is Real Opinions, where it's just us going off on more modern films that actually were made. That comes out on another feed. You can also find all of our stuff on realopinions.com, as well as all of our social media platforms. For next time, I actually have a choice of 2 scripts for you, Harrison.
Do I get to choose? Am I in charge of our fate? Because last time I chose Wonder Woman, I don't think that worked out well for us.
Yeah, that's why I narrow it down to you for 2 options.
Okay.
these are ones that I found earlier, which are, we can either read Indiana Jones and the Monkey King, or Indiana Jones and the Saucer Men from Mars. The Monkey King is written by Chris Columbus, and it was originally, it was pitched after I think it was the original pitch for The Last Crusade. It was actually the original pitch for Indiana Jones 3, and then they tweaked it because Steven Spielberg didn't like the fantasy as much, and he wanted to make the Holy Grail less of a actual Deus Ex Machina.
Right.
And then Saucer Men from Mars is obviously Kingdom of the Crystal Skull.
All right, let's do the Monkey King.
Okay.
We'll do the Monkey King.
Cool.
I can tell you want me to say that. I can tell when
we can do both of them.
when I said the Saucer
and then one the next week.
When I saw you couldn't see his face, but I could see that he was like, "Damn it! Why did I entrust him? Like, if it's up to me to pick Wonder Woman and then the Sorcerer from Mars." I picked it. I can still say that was me.
Yes. Yeah.
But everything else.
Well, so tune in next time where we will have a Indiana Jones script if we have. Yeah. And maybe we can make it a double bill. I don't know.
Whichever one's shortest, we'll do.
Yeah. Right. Thank you very much for listening. Good stuff. Great.